Hey everyone, it's Chris from chrisbeatcancer.com, and today I am interviewing Mike Adams, the Health Ranger. Mike is a fearless consumer advocate, an award-winning investigative journalist, internet activist, and science lab director. He's also the founder and editor of naturalnews.com, which is the internet's most trafficked natural health news website. He's also the creator of counterthink.com, foodinvestigations.com, it's a mouthful, healingfoodreference.com, and many other websites on natural health topics. Mike is a legend in the natural health space. He's written over 2,000 articles. He's reached over 100 million people through his various websites. He's also a musician and a composer and a computer programmer, and the rumor has it he solved the Rubik's Cube in 26 seconds. So Mike is also one of the kindest, most generous people I've met, and he's absolutely brilliant. I haven't confirmed this, but I think he's probably a genius level IQ, and I know this is going to be one of the most fun and interesting interviews I've ever done and that you'll ever hear. So no pressure, Mike.
Well, that's a lot to live up to there, Chris. Thanks for the intro. It's great. It's great to join you. We've both done a lot of interesting things in our lives. I'm looking forward to this interview to share with you anywhere you want to go with this. But
awesome.
It's just great to join you.
Thanks, man. Yeah. So we've met at several events, but we really got to know each other better this summer when I came down with Ty and Sayer and Manny and a few other folks to film for The Sacred Plant. And I don't know if you heard this story, but when we were down there, Manny, we got down to Austin, and Manny said, he's like, hey, man, I got this extra ticket. I got these 2 tickets to go do an aquafly lesson. Do you know what aquafly is?
I do, yes.
Have you ever done it?
I've not done it, no. Okay. But
so
we see people doing it.
Yeah, I'll describe it briefly. But basically, aquafly are these like boots you put on. You get in the water, and you put on these like jet boots, and you're hooked up to a jet ski. And so there's a guy on a jet ski, and when he revs the engine, it shoots water through this hose into your boots, and you just like shoot up out of the water like Iron Man or something. And of course, like we're both just flopping around, like just busting left and right, trying to figure it out. But it was super fun. And by the end of the lesson, like in the hour lesson that we shared, we both kind of like got the hang of it a little bit, and it was super fun. And apparently one of the top aquafly competitor in the world trains at this place around the corner from you.
Is that right?
Yeah. So if you ever want to go take a lesson, I can't remember the name of it. I'll give it to you later. Yeah, man, okay. You should go do it. It was a blast.
That's awesome.
So total random rabbit trail there. But anyway, so Mike, man, the question I want to ask first is, how did you become the Health Ranger?
Well, look, like you, I just have a passion for sharing healing information with people. And also like you, I went through a personal health crisis very early on. I followed the standard American diet and standard American medicine in my youth, and I didn't know anything about nutrition. And I was in the tech industry. I ran a software company, and by age 30, I was in a very sad state in terms of health. I was borderline obese, borderline type 2 diabetic. I had chronic pain, high cholesterol, all kinds of things. So, at some point you say, well, this doesn't seem right. Maybe I'm doing something wrong. You got to remember back in I grew up in the 70s and 80s, no one had connected food to disease. In fact, it was considered a conspiracy theory back then. If you said that what you eat determines what health outcomes you experience, you were called a quack. All right. I mean, that's how it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah.
That this was considered the standard information. Doctors back in the 1960s, they only thought there were 4 vitamins. And if you got the 4 vitamins, that's all you needed. You didn't even need food, they thought. Like, chemistry was all you needed, and you could live forever on 4 vitamins. Well, they also thought that you could eat sugar, that sugar was the same as, let's say, a fresh avocado smoothie. They said calories are calories. It doesn't matter where you get them. So like a lot of people, I was following that, and I was eating a lot of processed foods, and I got into a lot of trouble. And to make a long story short, I eventually started reading and researching and learning and found a whole new universe of information about natural healing, nutrition, disease prevention, and so on. And that's how I got started as a health ranger, just sharing that information, helping millions of people heal and prevent disease and reverse disease. And then I think 3 years ago, I started an analytical laboratory in Central Texas using mass spec analytics. We're an ISO accredited lab now. So I'm a food forensic scientist now, and I look at foods. I wrote that book called Food Forensics, which details the heavy metals concentrations in 800 foods and spices and pet foods and so on. And I've got another book coming up soon on pesticides and herbicides. So we are now, I publish science papers. We're innovating new techniques for analytical methods. And that's the future, I think, is what I call the democratization of science, to get the scientific results of food into the hands of everyday people so that everyone can make a decision about what they're eating. So that's really a lot of my passion now.
Man, I'm glad you brought that up, and there's a million directions I want to go, and I hope I get to go in all of them. But the first one is, do you remember the first influencer or author or person that you came across when you were trying to get well? Who was that? Do you remember?
Well, yeah, for me, the first book I read was just Sugar Busters, because I was hypoglycemic at that time, and I didn't know why. I would eat breakfast, and a couple hours later, I would almost black out from low blood sugar, but I didn't know what that was. And believe it or not, at that time, I went to see a doctor, and the doctor told me that hypoglycemia doesn't exist. I mean, this was medical knowledge back then. Okay. I mean, it's unreal. And I'm not that old. I mean, I'm almost 50, but, I'm not crazy old here. This was in the 1980s or early 1990s. Doctors didn't know anything. Most of them don't know that much even today, unless they get additional training in nutrition. But they said hypoglycemia doesn't exist, and they said that it's all in your head. I'm like, no, I feel like I'm going to pass out. Something's wrong with my blood sugar. So I read Sugar Busters, and that woke me up, and immediately I stopped drinking soda. Because like a lot of people, I went through college drinking Mountain Dew and Coke, Pepsi. It was a normal thing in that day, right? Everybody was drinking soft drinks. Well, it turns out that high fructose corn syrup was killing me and giving me all of these health problems. Once I stopped drinking soda, I had such an improvement in my health that I decided, well, there must be more to this. Like, what else can I improve in my diet and get great results? And so, like, fast forward to today, I remember that when I was in college, I took a Spanish class and I had a very difficult time learning Spanish. My brain could not really fathom that foreign language. Well, today, fast forward, I'm twice as old. I now speak pretty good Chinese, and I spoke fluent Spanish when I lived in Ecuador. I'm able to learn better. The brain works better. The body works better because of nutrition and avoidance of toxic chemicals. And even that, just saying that today, most doctors would disagree with that, and they would say, oh, there's no connection between nutrition and brain function. Really? What's your brain powered by? It's powered by the blood in your body. Your blood is made by the food that you ate. I mean, your body makes your blood, right, in your bones. What does it use for raw materials to make your blood? It uses the food you just ate and the beverages you just drank. Your blood powers your brain. Of course it matters what you eat. So, that's kind of a summary there.
You are what you ate, right?
Yeah.
So I was going to ask you about Ecuador, and I'm glad you brought it up because you reminded me. So at one point, you decided to leave the United States and move to Ecuador and live there for a while and then decided to come back. So tell me that story. Like, how did that happen, and what did you learn in the process?
Well, I was one of those people who saw very early on that America was headed for some real problems that are now very evident today. Obviously, we have a lot of economic problems. We have social upheaval. We have political polarization. And America is in trouble today, and almost everyone who's paying attention agrees with that assessment now. But I saw it pretty early on, and I decided that I wanted to get out of the country and operate from another country where I could comment on America without being censored. And now we see censorship is in full swing. We see Google, YouTube, and Facebook censoring not only my website, but probably yours as well, probably thousands of other people who are talking about health and raw foods and nutrition and organics, especially if you start talking about the ingredients in vaccines or the pesticides or glyphosate or GMOs, you're going to get censored. Well, I saw that coming, so my goal was to get out of the country and establish a base of operations from South America. I went to Ecuador and I lived there for 2 years, and we grew a food forest. I actually, some of the land where Matt Monarch lives today, he bought from me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Matt Monarch was my neighbor for about a year, and we planted, before Matt got there, we had planted 300 tropical trees, and we had built pathways into the hills and everything. Well, that's Matt's property today, plus some additional that he bought next to it. So, Matt's done some amazing things down there, and he's had retreats and so on and educated a lot of people. Well, we were there also living that lifestyle and harvesting foods and growing, all kinds of year-round medicine. Chris, I was up to 70% of my diet was based on things I grew in my own farm.
I love that.
70%. And I have not been able to get back to that since.
Yeah, it's hard without a tropical climate, right?
Right, it's a tropical climate. It was like spring year-round. You could just plant anything, any day. There were no seasons, really.
Yeah.
So you could just grow everything all the time, including endless papaya, by the way. Just like papaya, every day.
Mangoes and papaya and pineapples.
Yeah, the avocados just falling off the trees everywhere. It was amazing. Well, so,
So why leave?
Well, it turns out that Ecuador, to be a foreigner in another country, if you're a well-known foreigner, turns out not to be such a great idea. Now, if you're not well-known, if you're not an online personality or anything, Ecuador is a great place. A lot of people live there very happily, and there are other countries too, Costa Rica and so on, where people have a great life. But for me, I found that I was a little too well-known. I was too famous, and all the local taxi drivers knew where I lived, and people would come visit unannounced, and taxi drivers would drop them off on my driveway.
Wow,
like,
yeah.
Hey, we came to meet you. I'm like, did you think of making an appointment? Because I'm working here today, I'm planning things. So it got to be really untenable. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't live where everybody knew where I was. And I gave hundreds of tours, by the way, of my farm to people who just showed up. I did the best I could, but eventually it was too much. So I ended up moving back. I chose Texas, and I live more anonymously. No one knows where I live. My name is not on the property where I live, and so on. Nobody visits, and which is important because I run a refuge now. I rescued donkeys from the fires of 2011. So we nursed the donkeys back to health, and they've had babies now. So we have more donkeys. We have Nigerian dwarf goats, and we milk them for goat milk for a while. We have a lot of food self-reliance now. We grow out of containers, the Food Rising Grow containers, and we do a lot here, locally in Central Texas. It's a great place for doing what we do, and we have our base of operations here now. So I hope I didn't go on too long there, but
man,
that's the real story.
I love it. It's fascinating to me, and I remember reading an article you wrote years ago about sort of dispelling the myths and the fantasies that people have about escaping the U.S. and living in a foreign country, and the lessons you'd learned. And you just really summarized it so well. And it I was one of those people that had that sort of fantasy, right? And I read your article, I was like, oh yeah, okay, I could see how being the foreigner in a foreign country could make you a target.
Well, absolutely. Maybe I didn't speak to that enough, but you are a target. There was an attempt to blackmail me at one time in Ecuador, by the way, by some unscrupulous operators. One of them was Ecuadorian, and one of them was American. So it's not the Ecuadorian people that did it. It was a team of bad people. There were other people. My neighbors had gold stolen from them. They had gold as a backup, in case of a crisis or a collapse. And they had their gold stolen, and you couldn't really do anything. You got to understand that, law and due process in America is a very valuable thing. It's very important to protect lawfulness and due process, because in many other countries, including Ecuador, for example, the local police would come knock on your door all the time and ask for donations for gasoline. That was their excuse. We need gasoline, gasolina, for their trucks. Was it really for gasoline? Who knows? But if you didn't pay up, you were scrutinized. So, if you want to live in a country where police are knocking on your door, sort of demanding money, That's Ecuador. And it's a lot of South America.
Yeah, right. Not just Ecuador, right?
Yeah, yeah. So, some things to think about. I learned a lot there. I had a great experience, and, I shared that with a lot of people. But I've also come to learn that when things get crazy in society, you don't want to be the foreigner. And so in Central Texas, myself and my wife, we fit in just fine. My wife is an immigrant. She's from Taiwan. We've been together over 25 years, but Texas has enough of an international population that's not unusual for, a Caucasian guy like myself and a Taiwanese woman like my wife, to be a couple and walk around. And Texas is very polite, very inviting. We're near Austin. It's just a great place. It's been fantastic.
I'll have to edit this and send that snippet to the Texas Visitors Bureau or something. Right?
Well,
come to Texas.
I don't want everybody to come to Texas unless you are willing to, be part of the culture, be polite, be into self-reliance. Texans are all about self-reliance.
Yeah.
They don't want big government actually interfering with everything they do. They want to be able to grow their own food and have a farm and not have regulators stopping by every hour of the day to tell them what to do. So it's you got to have the right Texas attitude to do well in Texas, I think. And so if you have that attitude, come on to Texas. If you don't, go somewhere else, really.
Yeah. I'm in Tennessee. It's not that different.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you know what I'm talking about.
I do. I definitely do. So, you see a lot of one thing I always when I think about you, I wonder, how do you stay sane seeing so much information come across your desk? And a lot of it's alarming, right? And you're seeing more than most people in the world as far as just volume of information and potentially bad news, scary news, concerning news. How do you stay sane, man?
Well, you're right that I review all the science and medicine news headlines and academic headlines every day. And I still assign all the key stories to our writing team. And so I do. I see a lot of crazy stuff come across my desk. Let me just give you two examples for those watching this. Just crazy stuff out of the blue. I wasn't looking for it, but here it is. Okay. Story number one. Food scientists, genetic engineers, have created now what's called RNA interference technology, where they can engineer crops to develop RNA fragments that interfere with targeted metabolic functions of pests like insects, so they can cause infertility in insects, or they can cause the insect to starve to death to be unable to process its own food. This is genetic
weird.
Engineering weaponization.
Yeah.
Now, if you understand anything about genetic science, you also understand that this could potentially be used to target races of people. This is a thing. It doesn't limit itself to just insects. You could have an RNA sequence in the crops, and this is not a conspiracy theory. This is mainstream science, okay? This is mainstream science. I just did a video about this where we cited the study. This is all in peer-reviewed published studies.
But it's mainstream science that is too science-y to make the evening news.
Right. I mean,
right.
There is so much that's in the scientific literature that you never see.
Right.
But this technology could be used to turn food crops into a weapon to, let's say, eliminate black people,
wow,
or eliminate white people, or eliminate Hawaiian people. I mean, if you could target a gene set, if you were some Dr. Evil globalist and you wanted to turn the food into a weapon against a certain group of people, the technology exists. That's all I'm saying. So that's just one example. Second example, I saw this press release from UNICEF about how they were doing this mass vaccination program in Africa. They just vaccinated 350,000 children. And I'm thinking, oh, okay, that's just another day in Africa. But then I read the press release and it said they're being vaccinated against vaccine-induced polio. And I said, what is that? What's vaccine? Well, vaccine-derived polio. I was like, what's that? And I kept reading. It turns out that the outbreak that just happened in that country was caused by polio vaccines, because polio vaccines contain live viruses sometimes, and it causes an outbreak of polio. And then they use that to vaccinate 350,000 children against the outbreak that they just caused from the other vaccines. In other words, vaccines are used to inject,
That's a great business model, by the way.
What's that?
It's a great business model, by the way.
That's the thing. It's repeat business. The vaccines cause the disease and then that they claim to treat, and then they cause another round and so on. Now, I'm not saying all polio is caused by vaccines. It's actually caused by two things: wild polio, which does exist in places like Syria, or vaccine-induced polio. Well, now that is a scientific fact, and that's in the press releases. It's openly talked about if you dig into the literature, but no one in the media dares talk about that. It's considered a conspiracy theory by people who are ignorant of the scientific reality. So to get back to your question, how do I maintain my sanity? Well, it's very simple. I have some principles, and that is I always tell the truth. I never intentionally deceive anyone about what I'm seeing, but I'm also never censoring myself just to try to fit in with the scientific status quo. And I spend time in nature. So every day I spend time in nature, and it's a recharge and it's a balancing, because nature is truth. Whereas the world of man is full of deception and full of poison and full of really, Holocaust level death and destruction throughout human history, right? That's mankind, and it can get very disgusting. But if you turn to nature and you see the lichen on the tree, and you see the soil and the healthy soil and the grasses, and you say, this is a system that's in balance, that tells the truth. This is a system that is reliable, and nature is my healer, even psychologically, energetically, not just in terms of nutrition, but also in terms of just my entire, energetic space, if you will. I could not stay sane without time in nature.
It's pretty neat. I've seen some, just recently, for whatever reason, a few articles pop up, research on forest bathing, right? So, we know that it's beneficial to get out in nature, but now there's actually, and maybe this science has existed for a while, but I just stumbled across some recent studies on, they take people into the forest for a certain amount of time, and then they measure their blood levels, and there's a reduction in stress hormones and improvements in other health markers. Yeah, just from spending, 5, 10, 20, 30 minutes in the forest, just in the woods,
right?
Just walking around.
Well, what we call forest bathing today used to be called life.
Living.
Yes. Living, yeah, like a generation ago. Now everybody's living in an office and sitting indoors all the time, which is too much, and you have to get outside into nature, because nature, nature provides everything you need. You just have to be wise enough to recognize it. The cancer industry, as you know, is always trying to find cures for cancer and treatments for cancer and chemicals for cancer. Mother Nature has already synthesized every molecule you need to beat cancer, as you know, and many other people have learned. You just have to be wise enough to go out and respect the natural remedies and cures and the balance that nature provides you, the fact that your body is biocompatible with nature.
Yeah, and you have to realize that the modern lifestyle and the modern Western diet, right, is killing you. Right?
It is.
There's that epiphany that I had and that I try to help people have, is that, hey, you got to take a look at your whole life and realize, wait a second, like I am living in disharmony with nature. Like nothing I'm doing is really what my ancestors did. Even 2 or 3 generations ago, our ancestors, their lives were very different, and they were much more grounded, into nature, and spent more time outside and ate more fresh food and whole foods and very little processed food at all, and much lower amounts of meat and dairy. I can go on, but this is me interviewing you here, so I'm going to stop. But I'm saying I agree.
You bring up a really interesting point. If you look at the history of, let's say, the last 7 or 8 generations in Western civilization, you used to have people living in the country for the most part, and people were trying to get into the city, which is an artificial environment. And then with the rise of electricity and technology and logistics and food mechanization and so on, you had all of these efficiencies that allow people to live in cities, and everybody then swarmed into the cities. Well, now we're finding that the cities are killing you. There's more air pollution, there's more noise pollution and light pollution, all of which cause cancer and increase stress and increase hormonal interference in the natural processes of the body. So cities are now places that people are trying to escape. If someone who's been successful in the city, maybe they made a lot of money with some tech company, and they want to get out of the city. Where do they go? They move out into Montana, out in nature, log cabin somewhere. Why is that? Well, because now people are realizing that cities are not really the answer. And you can live in a city and you can go get some nature from time to time and transition back and forth, and that's very helpful as well. I'm not condemning, all life in a city, but I'm just saying that the factors that are relevant here show that artificial environments induce disease and suffering and death. And there's now a move to get away from the cities, the decentralization of population density. And interestingly, the widespread deployment of internet technologies and the upcoming rise of virtual reality tech means that there will be more virtual offices, and people can be located anywhere that they have an internet connection, and they can participate in meetings, and they can participate in a business, as an employee, even though they live somewhere where there's pine tree forest all around them, let's say.
Yeah.
And that will actually be much healthier for them.
Also, there may be a rise in people living in the city and virtually going into the country.
Oh, that will happen as well. And there will be therapeutic benefits to that, by the way.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything that, that's calming you down, relaxing you, lowering stress hormones. Sure.
Absolutely. Like immersion into a first world simulation of an amazing forest and waterfall and, birds chirping and everything. I spend time in nature every day, and I try to focus on all of the sounds of nature, because when you live out in rural Texas, as I do, you can actually not hear the sounds anymore because you get so used to them. All the different birds and the locusts and the katydids and the frogs, all these different sounds. It's a chorus, and I get to experience it every day, but I couldn't imagine all of those voices being silenced and living in a place where there were no natural sounds. To me, that would be toxic. Yeah. And that is like downtown San Francisco.
Yeah, New York. All the sounds are trucks and cars and car horns and, police sirens.
Exactly. And actually, by the way, I don't know if you're into sound healing or any kind of energy medicine, but if you listen to locust sounds exist at multiple high-frequency harmonics. And locusts are actually engaging in what we would call in Buddhism toning or chanting. There's actually a calming effect because of if you were to look at the harmonics visually, you would see multiple layers of harmonics coming out of the wings of these locusts, and they are literally singing constantly, and there is a measurable therapeutic healing effect from simply being exposed to those sounds. It's just part of the way nature heals us.
Of course, we know birds chirping, right? There's chirping melodies, right? Tree frogs. I was in Costa Rica. Well, first of all, I live in a suburb outside of Memphis, and there are a lot of trees. So at certain times during the year, and especially now during the summer, like depending on the climate or the day's weather, you go out and it's at night, and there is a symphony of insect sounds, right? But I went down, so it's not foreign to me. But we took a bunch of people down to Costa Rica earlier this summer for a retreat and camped out in the jungle. And man, because you're in Ecuador, the jungle sounds, they're so loud. If you're camping, it is so, when we were laying down to go to sleep, I just couldn't believe how loud it was. My wife had to put in earplugs. It was too much for her. Yeah, I was just like, I don't even know, I can't even begin to it was also cicada season. So they were out in full force, but all these frogs and insects and bugs, and then it would calm down in the middle of the night. But then, about 5 a.m., then the monkeys would start howling in the trees, and then everything else would wake up and come alive, and that's what wakes you up. Right? Yeah. It wasn't even the sunshine; it was like all of these animals. It was pretty amazing. It really was.
And also, I imagine you could see an amazing array of stars in the sky as well, because you were far from light pollution. So, again, people who are living in cities, they have never seen the sky, not the way it really is. Think about it. Most people who are living today in first world nations, they have never heard the world in which they live, and they have never seen the sky, really, because there's light pollution and there's noise pollution. And if you think about it also, there's more to this. They have never experienced cognition and creativity in the way people used to be able to a couple hundred years ago. Why are all the great composers people who lived in the 1800s, for example, or the 1700s or earlier, because they didn't have this bombardment of toxic information. They didn't have Snapchat. They didn't have Facebook. They had the ability to have an outpouring of creativity and innovation because their minds were open to the world around them instead of being suffocated and bombarded by all of this bad information.
And clutter, right? It's just clutter.
It's clutter.
Yeah.
So we are really, as a species right now, humanity is being cognitively handicapped. There's an assault of toxic fragrance, dryer sheets and fabric softeners and laundry products, right?
Absolutely.
They all cause cancer too.
And all the fragrances in all body care products and household products, right? Sure.
Yeah, the sunscreen people put on is assaulting their bodies with chemistry, and it's causing the brain to actually recede like a turtle will go into its shell. Your neurons are receding because of this onslaught of noise and light and fragrance, and the senses are being bombarded constantly, and it causes you to escape to a lower brain function. And this is, I don't know how deep you want to get into this, but
go as deep as you want, man.
We are seeing in America today, we are seeing an actual literal madness, a cognitive madness. We are seeing a civilization go cognitively insane, and this is not spontaneous. It has a cause, and we've just touched on some of the causes. There are more, but you know how the Roman Empire fell because of lead poisoning in the aqueducts. That was just one heavy metal, and it drove people insane because lead does that. Well, today we have lead, we have mercury, we have aluminum, we have fragrance, we have noise and light pollution, we have just poison from every angle. So
more than you can even list.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We're talking, like just in my lab, we're working on pesticide quantitation methodology, and we're picking a subset of the pesticides that exist, and we picked 253 pesticide chemicals to quantitate out of a list of like 6,000. They're all out there. They're in your food. You're eating these chemicals, and they don't just break down automatically. They go into your body, and they have physiological effects on your brain, on your neurons, on your kidney, your liver, your heart, everything. We're living in a toxic stew that humanity has created for itself for the almighty dollar. There are a few corporations that are getting rich and making billions or trillions of dollars while poisoning humanity to a point of really almost suicide. So, that's the big, dark picture of where we are right now.
Yeah, and it is, the deeper down the rabbit hole you go, and you're deeper than anyone I know, which is, again, back to the question is, I'm so impressed that you are so, calm and happy and not, wearing a tinfoil hat, right? Or look, in like a bunker, you know what I'm saying?
I'm on camera with you right now, so.
Yeah.
But, look, I have difficult days too. There are times I shake my head and I say, what is happening to our world? This is not the world that I grew up in. I don't remember growing up and teachers telling us, yeah, you're going to be an adult in a world where everybody's being mass poisoned by their own food. Like, what the hell, right? Yeah. What is going on? So, I may seem calm and collected right now. I'm trying to share knowledge here, but, I got to tell you, Chris, there are times that I'm frustrated, I'm disgusted. And there are times that I don't know how we beat this. I honestly don't know. But we certainly don't give up. We certainly don't join the dark side and start pushing GMOs and glyphosate. That's not an option.
Well, the encouraging thing, and I know, you know this too, but it is encouraging that awareness is really growing and growing and growing. Obviously, you're a huge catalyst for that. I'm a small part of it, but the organic food movement is bigger than it's ever been. So that means more people are eating organic, non-GMO, non-pesticide laden food. And my personal thing is I have to keep reminding myself, okay, things are better than they used to be. We have improvements, but we got a long way to go.
We live in a time where we have access to more nutrition than any other generation in history. And you're right, we've had tremendous successes. The younger generation today, they don't drink soda anymore, really, not almost nobody. They know that food does determine your health. It took a generation for that idea to become mainstream. Again, that used to be a, quote, conspiracy theory. Now it's a well-known fact. The younger generation today understands that you have to look at the supply line. Where does your food come from?
Yeah.
Where does your water come from? What about Nestle, the corporatization of water, the monopolization of water controls? All of these issues now, the youth are waking up to these issues. That's a huge, huge success.
That's exciting. I mean, it really is. I was the fast food generation, right? I was a child of the late 70s and the 80s and 90s. So, like, everything was corporate, commercialization, fast food, franchises. Like, that was, like, my generation. The generation before me was, it just wasn't like that. There were far fewer places to go out to eat. You know what I mean?
Right.
There was a million. But, yeah, it's encouraging to see the younger generation, for sure, being so in tune with eating organic food, with environmental sustainability, with supporting companies that have a social conscience.
Well, right. I'm glad you mentioned that, because the role of corporations in our society has become extremely powerful over the last generation, let's say. In fact, certain corporations like Google are now themselves more powerful than entire nations. Google is so powerful because it controls the information that you can see or that you can't see. And Google is actively censoring a lot of truth about healthy living, organics. Google is really in bed with the pharmaceutical industry. For example, Google just banned our online shopping cart from Google Shopping because they said that astaxanthin is an unapproved medicine.
Wow.
So, yeah. And we said, what? What are you talking about? Everybody sells astaxanthin. It's a microalgae. And they said, well, according to the FDA, it's not approved, so they're banning all the online stores that sell astaxanthin, but they're happy to promote pharmaceuticals, you see. So we are living in a very dangerous time, and especially the youth today are understanding that corporations really should not be trusted by default. Google, Facebook, drug companies, even Twitter, they have all been engaged in efforts to silence public debate from a science perspective on medicine risks versus rewards. All of them have been engaged in censorship. I've been very heavily censored by all of those players repeatedly. And yet, the good news is they can't shut us down. People crave the truth about this. People want to share inspiring information that contributes to their awakening about creating a better world. And believe me, we're not going to get to a better world through the mass chemical poisoning of the minds of the people. And by the way, just as a side note, everything, I'm not going to make this political, but everything happening in Washington today about healthcare reform is a joke when you consider that the reason we are diseased in the first place is because everybody's eating poison.
Right.
So it's a waste of time to talk about healthcare reform, whether it should be Obamacare or not Obamacare or whatever. It's irrelevant until you stop the cause of the disease.
I'm glad you brought that up, because it is a good, something that I didn't understand, I feel like, until recently in my life, was I had this epiphany when I learned that healthcare is much more affordable, much less expensive in countries that don't have health insurance.
That's true.
Right? So, you can go get a hysterectomy in India for a fraction of the cost of a hysterectomy in the U.S. or any kind of surgery or whatever, because the hospitals and doctors have to compete with each other. So that keeps the prices low and makes it affordable, makes healthcare accessible for thousands, if not millions, more people. Versus in the U.S., because everybody's got insurance, right? Your insurance pays the bill. And they keep jacking up. I mean, there's probably charts of this on your site, on Natural News, but just the steep incline of the cost of healthcare across the board in relation to the amount of insurance coverage available. And so, yeah, it's a total mess. And fixing Obamacare isn't going to solve the problem.
No, it's a shell game. They're just trying to decide who pays for disease.
Right.
And that's not a sustainable model. You need to stop the disease. A lot of people don't know that the United States is one of the few countries where drug companies can advertise on television.
I know.
And that was legalized by the FDA in 1997 or 1998. Believe it or not, President Trump could order the FDA to reverse that decision and block drug advertising on television. That would drastically lower costs, because what's happening is people get brainwashed by the TV ads. They go into their doctor and they demand this drug. The doctor gives them that drug. Well, then the drug companies give kickbacks to the doctor. So the doctors are really affiliates for the drug companies, or sometimes prostitutes, you might say, for the drug companies. GlaxoSmithKline pled guilty under the Obama administration to massive felony bribery crimes. They paid a $2 to $3 billion fine with the Department of Justice, the largest in history. They admitted to bribing 44,000 doctors in the United States.
Wow.
Massive bribery network. Now, but here's the kicker, Chris. If you had a company and you were guilty of a felony crime of such widespread bribery, number one, you would go to jail, and your
forever.
company would be banned forever from doing business with the government. Well, that never happened to GlaxoSmithKline. Nobody went to jail. Nobody's banned from doing business with the government. In fact, if you go down the list, every drug company in existence today, the big ones, every one of them is guilty of price fixing, bribery, felony crimes, scientific fraud, human experimentation, crimes against humanity. Every one of them is guilty of that, and every one of them is able to do business with the government, so much so that under former President Bush, a rule was established in the government that said that the government cannot negotiate discounts with drug companies for drug prices under Medicare. So the drug companies got full price. The taxpayers were getting ripped off. Drug prices were, spiked through the roof, and everybody's going broke. The reason we can't afford healthcare is because of the pharmaceutical monopolies. And it continues. It continued under Bush, Obama, and now Trump. And nobody is doing anything about it. Nobody's even mentioning it.
Yeah, they really are the puppet masters, and they influence everything: medical education, the government, public policy.
Yep.
It's so vast, and people think it's a conspiracy. It's not. It's just capitalism. They just have infiltrated every aspect of even owning pharmaceutical. Even to the extent of owning pesticide companies, right?
You know how in the 1970s and 80s, with the rise of cocaine, you know how countries like Colombia in South America became what we call a narco state, that the narcotics industry became so powerful that it infiltrated and ran the government, ran the judiciary, ran the police, right?
Same thing happening here.
Same thing's here, but we are a pharma state. So pharma has done to America what the narcos did to Colombia. It's the exact same model, except those drugs were called illegal and these drugs are called legal. But in many cases, they are the same drugs. I mean, it's speed is amphetamines for children now. It's ADHD drugs. It's like pharma meth,
Yeah.
Well, so we are a pharma state.
Even recently, there's been sort of an awareness resurgence, maybe not resurgence, but just an awareness explosion about opiates, right? And
exactly. My point, yes.
Yeah, the massive opiate addiction problem we have in the U.S. because of pharmaceutical drugs.
Yeah.
You're right on the money.
Well, and look, this is not a conspiracy theory either. This has been covered in mainstream media, but in the Middle East, the U.S. military guards the opium fields. You know that, right? The opium trade comes out of places like Afghanistan, a massive opium producer. And, opium is considered an illegal drug in the United States unless Big Pharma sells it to you in a prescription. And the U.S. military defends the production fields in Afghanistan. I mean, Geraldo Rivera went there and did an interview with them and talked about, we have to respect their culture, blah, blah, blah. Well, wait a second. 33,000 Americans were killed last year, according to the CDC. I think it's 33 or 35,000, just from opioid and addictive drug deaths. The Vietnam War, took about 50,000 American lives. That means that the pharmaceutical industry is killing, 3/5 as many as died in that entire war every year in America, just so they can keep selling opioid drugs. And they say, don't turn to natural remedies. Oh, don't use natural medicine. That's dangerous. Well, I don't remember, Chris. I don't remember some tree bark herb like cinnamon killing 35,000 people a year. Never happened.
Yeah, it's right. I know. It's just insane.
It's totally wild. How did we get here? I don't even know the answer to that.
It's just that very slow, insidious creep, right? This infiltrating creep that is the tentacles have just spread over decades and to influence every aspect of our life and culture. You mentioned earlier about, well, two things I wanted to comment on. One was, I have some friends that are pharmaceutical reps, right? And you mentioned how the pharmaceutical industries are bribing doctors. And one of the ways they do this that is the legal way is these pharmaceutical sales reps. And again, these are my friends, and they've confessed to me they don't like their jobs, okay? They don't know how to get out.
But they make a lot of money, don't they?
Right. Yeah, it's the golden handcuffs. Yep. They don't know how to get out. And they will pass things to me under the table, like sales materials and things like, dude, look at this. But the point is they are catering breakfast, lunch, and dinner at doctors' offices pretty much every day of the week. A pharmaceutical rep is bringing in, donuts and, breakfast sandwiches for breakfast. And then another company's bringing in, we're bringing in Subway sandwiches for lunch. And then another one's bringing in dinner every single day. It's like, basically, like, one of them's like, dude, I'm basically just a professional caterer, just bringing food, hoping to get just a few minutes with the doctor to pitch him on this new drug.
Well, the drug companies they host, they pay doctors to give to speak.
Yep.
Like do a luncheon speaking deal, and there might be 3 people there to hear them speak, and the doctor's paid like $5,000 or $10,000. It's a bribe. Or they'll host Hawaii vacations that they call continuing medical education.
Yeah.
And they pay their way to Hawaii in a luxury hotel room and everything. The doctor flies to Hawaii. You show up for 5 minutes for a speech given by the drug company, and then you're out the door and you're surfing all day, and the drug company pays for the whole thing. It's widespread corruption and bribery, and it's across the board in the medical system. I mean, can you imagine if the herb industry or the natural products industry engaged in any of this stuff? They would be arrested. There would be national headline news. Oh my God, a herbalist bribed a doctor, went to jail. It would be national news.
Yeah, it would. It would. Let's talk about your science lab.
Yeah.
So I'd love to know what some of the most interesting, alarming, whatever discoveries you've made since you started really, you sort of dove into food safety testing, food contamination testing, everything you do in the lab.
Right. Okay. Well, where to begin? Let me give out the.
It's going to take another hour.
The website address for the lab, if you want to see the lab itself, is cwclabs.com. It stands for Consumer Wellness Center. So cwclabs.com. So, and just to set the record on this, we are an ISO accredited lab. We're internationally accredited. So our lab results can be used in any court of law, in any Western court, anywhere in the world as strict evidence, which means we're audited. We have to pass tests and so on. So we're a legit lab. In fact, most university labs are not accredited. So when I visited the university lab at University of Texas in Austin, and I was looking at their methodology. It was a decade behind what we're doing. I mean, we are like really cutting edge. So as a result, we see a lot of things that other labs miss. We have really cutting edge instrumentation. For example, we can detect mercury down to about 20 parts per trillion. So a part per million is a small amount, and a part per billion is 1/1000th of a part per million, and a part per trillion is 1/1000th of a part per billion.
It's pretty tiny.
In other words, 1/1,000,000th of a part per million. So you get into a lot of units here. But the point is, we can see mercury and we can see pesticides at very, very low levels. And one of the big findings we had, the earliest finding we had, was that a lot of the organic rice protein being sold in health food stores all across America was very heavily contaminated with lead, mercury, and tungsten.
Mike, when this came out, when you published this, this is funny. So one of the brands, I don't want to slam anybody because it's been some years, but one of the brands that came out that was heavily contaminated was a brand that I had been saying, like, I love this brand, and I was taking it every day. Yeah. And then I was like, oh no, and it was almost like a little bit of a mini PR, nightmare for me, and it's fine because it's important. But it was like, oh man, like this is not good. I've been totally telling everybody this is great, and I've been taking it myself because it's organic, right? This organic brand.
Right.
Whole Foods type organic brand.
Oh, yeah. Well, there was a massive
I remember
cover-up. We were viciously attacked. We were threatened with multiple lawsuits. None of them ever happened because all these companies sent their own products to labs for the first time after we blew the whistle, and they realized we were right. And I will mention one company because they've done the right thing and they've cleaned up all their products since then. And that company's Garden of Life. And Garden of Life, has took great steps after that to improve the cleanliness of their products, and they eliminated rice protein from their product line, the raw protein. But soon after my story broke,
that was the brand.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Well, okay, well, that was just a guess. I didn't know
that was the one.
Jordan Rubin called me, and he told me on the phone. He said, "Look, I've been out of the company. I haven't made sourcing decisions for 6 months. He didn't want to be. I didn't blame him or anything. I was just saying the company, because he sold his company at that time.
Sure.
But I still have, in case this ever goes to court, I still have multiple canisters of Garden of Life products in my lab, and I tell you to this day, as a scientific fact, they contain crazy high amounts of mercury and lead. And I can say that without being sued because they know it's true.
Yeah.
And
it's the old product.
And it's their old product,
Yeah.
right, from like 4 years ago now. But look, man, here's the truth. Garden of Life did not recall that product. So when my news came out, Garden of Life did not act ethically at that time, and they allowed those products to continue to be sold and consumed by people who were eating their mercury and eating their lead. And that is a factual statement, and I can back that up. They came around later and eliminated that product from that ingredient from their product supply, but it just goes to show you. And it wasn't just Garden of Life. There were many companies that had very contaminated products, and the importer of that material threatened to sue me, but because they were going to lose millions of dollars. I got to tell you, they were shipping 14 container loads, 40-foot containers of rice protein into the United States each month that was heavily contaminated with mercury and lead. And if we hadn't blown the whistle on it, nobody would have. The FDA said nothing. The mainstream media said nothing. Everybody was silent because it was a big scam. People were making money selling toxic products under the organic label. Now,
yeah, and the thing is too, to give the supplement manufacturers, all not just Garden of Life, but all of them, the benefit of the doubt. Obviously, they assumed because they were buying a certified organic ingredient to use in their product, they assumed that it was legit. I mean, but what we know now, thanks to you and others, is that yes, a product can be certified organic, which means it's not grown with pesticides and toxic chemicals and sludge and stuff. But if the soil and the environment is contaminated, it will pull contaminants from the soil into the rice, right? And that was the issue.
People understand this better today, but at the time it was a new idea. Rice is almost aquaculture because it's grown in water. And in China, which has virtually no environmental regulations that are enforced, the water that feeds the rice is toxic runoff from the factories. I mean, that water is the most toxic stuff. If you drank it, you would die. If you swim in it, you would be diseased. So they grow rice in it. And then the rice is processed to remove the rice syrup, brown rice syrup. It's a common sweetener. Then what's left over was then processed and shipped to the United States and sold as organic raw rice protein. Nobody did the tests. Nobody, I mean, look, USDA Organic, I'm a very strong supporter of organic. It's a good program, but it doesn't cover heavy metals. So
do
a lot of
any of
people
the
are shocked.
Organic certs like Natureland or EcoCert, do they cover contamination?
I don't know the answer to those, the ones that you mentioned. I'm not aware of any certification that requires heavy metals testing of the final product. No certification exists to my knowledge.
Right. So what I'd like to share what I've done, and then also talk about the Natural News Store too, because I know you've tested everything you sell like to
that's right.
the nth degree.
Yeah.
But what I've done for years is what I call supplement hedging. So you can assume you know what I'm saying. Like, and people always ask me like, well, what kind of vitamin D do you like, or what, And so there was always a handful of brands, and I say, look, I just rotate, man, because who knows?
That's smart.
Right? Who knows what's one could have contaminants in it. Another could just not be very potent, or just have a bunch
Right.
of filler in it, and you're not even getting much benefit. So,
Right.
I always encourage people to identify a handful of brands that have a good reputation, do some research on them, and then just rotate them. But you actually sell a lot of awesome supplements and food products in the Natural News store that have all been tested probably to a deeper degree than anything else on the market, I imagine.
We do the most testing of any retailer in the world, and it's actually called Health Ranger Store now.
Okay.
So it's healthrangerstore.com. And by the way, for the last couple of days, we just donated 50% of our sales to the Hurricane Harvey victims, and
That's awesome.
we're about to hit $50,000 in donation, which means people have purchased $100,000 worth of product from us to help those hurricane victims. So we
That's
do a
great.
lot of.
And I'll put a link, in the show notes or whatever, guys, for y'all
I
can
appreciate
check
that.
out the story. Yeah, absolutely.
We do very rigorous testing of not just the raw materials, but of every production lot. So one of the ways that anybody can be scammed in the industry, there's a lot of U.S. companies that are supplement companies, and they buy raw materials from China. So they may test the raw materials one time.
In the beginning.
In the beginning.
Yeah.
But China's notorious for, bait and switch. So they'll send you one clean batch. Yeah, it tests great. And then after that, you keep buying from them, and it's dirty, polluted stuff. Well, if you don't do the testing of every batch, you're selling contaminated product without even knowing it. And besides, by the way, the FDA requires what's called good manufacturing practices, or GMP. GMP requirements are very strict, and they actually require testing of every production lot. We are one of the few companies that actually does GMP compliant production. There are others like Now Foods, for example. You know the brand Now?
Yes.
I happen to know some of their scientists, and they are very rigorous about it as well. So Now Foods does all their testing, but they don't have as strict a limits as we do on heavy metals. But I don't mean to say their stuff's contaminated. It's not. Now Foods does very good testing. Gaia Herbs does good testing as well. Those are two brands that I would recommend in addition to my own brand, by the way.
Great. Yeah.
But I don't know how much testing the other companies do out there. A lot of them do no testing.
They're not required to do any testing. And
they're not
even required to have GMP certification, right?
Look, the thing is, you're required to abide by GMP. Everybody's required to. Most people don't. Most people wait for the FDA to send them a warning letter. Now, the FDA is running around the country. Their goal has been to do a surprise inspection of every supplement manufacturer within a 2-year window. They've already surprise inspected us twice, and we passed with flying colors. No problems. They're like, wow, you have your own lab? Most companies don't have that. But they are way behind schedule. Most supplement manufacturers have not ever been inspected by the FDA. And I know there was a company out in California, I'm not going to name the name, but they were a very prominent raw food company doing very high-end supplements. They got major warning letters from the FDA because they weren't cleaning their machines between filling the different pouches and packages with different products. So they weren't cleaning the machine. So you might have allergens in one product and they get transferred to another product. And most companies, by the way, I don't know how deep you want to get into this, but most companies don't do raw materials tracking to the point where they could do a successful recall if they have a food safety problem with an end product. For example, you might have an end product that has 25 ingredients in it, let's say. Those 25 ingredients, you have a lot number for your finished bottle. It's like lot 100, let's say. But you have batch numbers of all the raw materials that went into lot 100, and you may have run out of one raw material halfway through the production and switched to a different batch of, let's say, turmeric root. So your final lot 100, may contain 50 different batches of raw materials. Well, if you have a problem with this final lot and somebody gets sick or somebody gets a food poisoning, let's say, how do you know which products to recall? The FDA requires you to keep all of those records so that you know what to recall. Most companies do not keep those records.
Hmm.
We keep those records because that's GMP compliance, and we're talking stacks and stacks of 3-ring binder books, and we're going electronic for all that soon because there's so much paper. But most companies, even if they have a problem, they cannot issue a recall effectively because they can't trace the ingredients that went into the product.
And this is exactly why I will never be in the supplement business. Because I'm telling you, lots of people over the years have been like, hey, Chris, you're a popular, healthy guy. Like, you should come out with your own supplements. And I'm always like, nah, it sounds like too much trouble. So, and that was even before I knew the half of it, right? I was just like, it sounds like too much trouble. And now I'm like, man, kudos to you for even, A, for your integrity, and B, just for being able to keep up with all that and really keeping such detailed records and doing this testing that a lot of people aren't doing.
Well, part of the fun of this is, because we are a certified organic manufacturer and we've been through multiple organic audits, and we are GMP compliant, we've been through FDA audits, and we are a lab, and we've been through ISO accreditation. I can speak authoritatively about the supplement industry and the food safety industry. And until you've done it, you really don't know what goes on, what's behind the scenes. I was chatting with a guy from the organic certifying industry a couple weeks ago, and he was telling me horror stories about how people are faking their certificates and faking the paperwork. They buy something from China, and then they fake it, and they say they got it from a European country, for example. He was just telling me horror story after horror story and how he had to yank certification from different companies. The stuff that happens behind the scenes would blow your mind. That said, there are honest companies that are doing the right thing. Like I mentioned, Gaia Herbs, Nature's Path that makes the cereals, right? Nature's Path, 1 Degree Foods is another company. They make breakfast cereals, and they, as far as I know, they are doing the right thing, and they're very ethical. There are many, many companies out there that are very ethical. The key is being able to sort them out from the organic con artists that do exist in the industry, and they fake the paperwork and they sell toxic products, and they knowingly sell contaminated products to people because it makes them money to do so. They do exist. So I'm pro-organic, but I'm also like, make sure you know what you're doing.
It's kind of full circle on what we talked about earlier, because yes, the organic movement has exploded, right? Which is great. But you've got a lot of new players jumping in because it's a business opportunity who really don't care about health, don't care about improving the environment, don't care about the things we care about. They just see an opportunity to make some money, and they want to jump in and cash in on it, right?
Absolutely.
And some of them are very, very slick, very sophisticated marketers, and everything looks shiny and beautiful and perfect and healthy, and they make you want to buy it and put it in your body, or on your body.
Right. Right.
And it might just be just some crap.
Yeah, it might be crap. And let me say too, I will say Amazon.com sells a lot of counterfeit product. I know people in the industry who have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on lawsuits to try to stop the counterfeiting of their products on Amazon.com. The CEO of Birkenstock, the sandals company, they have banned all sales of their products on Amazon because everything's counterfeit.
Wow.
We have gone to Amazon and we have bought things like turmeric root powder and tested it in our lab, and we have consistently found alarming levels of high heavy metals. Look, the truth is that Amazon doesn't do any testing of what they sell. They sell millions of products. There's no way they could do that. But believe it or not, Chris, you may not believe this, Walmart has a massive laboratory in Arkansas, and Walmart tests everything they sell.
Wow.
They don't have the limits that we do. They're not as strict as we are, but at least if you buy something from Walmart, they test their children's toys, for lead in the red paint. They test everything they sell. They have a massive lab. It's acres. That's huge.
Impressive. Yeah.
Yes. Walmart tests everything. You're probably shocked to hear that. You think Amazon is maybe more advanced than Walmart. No, Amazon tests nothing. Walmart tests everything.
Amazon has no liability because it's all individual sellers, right?
Right.
Technically, Amazon isn't selling you anything. Well, no, that's not true. Some of it is actually theirs, but a lot of the sellers are individual sellers, so it really the buck stops with them.
Right. But Walmart is actually, doing something very ethical with that. Even children's toys, like I said. But of course, Walmart doesn't carry, the kind of superfoods and nutrition that you and I are into. So, that's too bad. But I went to Whole Foods several years ago. I had a meeting with one of their executives in Austin in person, and I gave them the documentation and said, "You are selling products that are contaminated with lead. Let me help you test all your products. I want you to sell clean products." And they rejected that, and they weren't interested. And now Whole Foods is owned by who? Amazon. And they still don't test anything. So
yeah, interesting.
Isn't it,
man? So let me ask you some fun questions, because we're a little bit over time. I want to respect your time. So let me shoot a couple of fun rapid fire questions.
All right, let's do
it. If you had to eat the same breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day, what would it look like?
Well, I do eat the same breakfast every day, and that's my organic avocado, coconut water, turmeric root smoothie with bananas in it as well.
You made one for me when I was down there.
That's right. Was it delicious?
Yes, it was delicious. Right? Yeah. You can throw pretty much any fruits and vegetables in a blender and blend them up, and I'm going to like it.
Yeah,
I'm pretty easy to please.
So that's what I do for breakfast every day anyway. And then for lunch or dinner, I vary it a lot. Sometimes it depends on my level of physical activity. If I'm working hard on the ranch, I actually need more, energy, even some animal fat, by the way. If I'm having an easy week, it's more of a vegan type of approach. But I'm not a vegan. I used to be, but I'm not pure vegan. I eat animal products, but I'm very, very careful about where I get them, and I'm pretty limited in the consumption. But
I'm the same way. I'm 98% plant-based. Occasionally I'll have a serving of animal protein, but it's a few times a month for me.
Right. I do whey protein every day though as well, but it's a super clean whey protein. So I don't know. I don't really have an answer for. I wouldn't want to eat the same thing in the afternoons and evenings every day.
But the question was if you had to.
If you had to, oh man, whatever it is, you would have an imbalance. Because you need the full spectrum of foods, to get all the phytonutrients and minerals. If you ate the same thing every day, you would eventually have a disease, no matter what it is.
You do need variety, absolutely. So another one, this is even more specific. We're drilled down even more. If you were stranded in a bunker or on a deserted island and you only had one food, right, to survive on, not forever, but indefinitely, what would you pick?
Chlorella, in my case.
Really?
I would pick chlorella because it's got the protein, it's got some of the essential fatty acids, and it's got chlorophyll, full of minerals, vitamins, and so on. It's really a full, if you're asking if it's just one thing.
Yeah, but could you get enough calories though with chlorella?
Well, no.
That'd be tough.
You'd have a very hard time. You'd lose some pounds, that's for sure, but you wouldn't be nutritionally deficient at least. Now, peanut butter would give you the calories. So. Mm-hmm. If I could have chlorella peanut butter sandwiches, that would be better.
I love it. That's great. Chlorella peanut butter sandwiches. Well, Mike, man, this has been super fun. Thank you so much. And I'll post links to everything we talked about in the show notes below the video. If you're listening to the podcast, it'll be in the show notes, and there's a link to chrisbeatcancer.com with other show notes and links. So, yeah, man, this has been just really great, really fun. I'm excited to get it out. Last question. I
always enjoy chatting with you.
Yeah, last question is,
okay,
to the person that has, that has cancer, what would you say to them? And I know that you could probably talk for an hour or 10 hours, but what would you say to someone that has cancer? A lot of cancer patients in the audience. What do they need to know?
Well, look, the big thing is don't let fear drive your decision, because fear is used against you. Fear is a weapon. And it's used by oncologists who are making money off the chemotherapy, by the way. And one of them went to prison. Dr. Farid Fatah went to prison for false diagnoses of cancer. They use fear against you to bypass your rational mind. The reason you don't have to just break down into fear is because you didn't get cancer overnight. It took decades probably for you to develop a diagnosable tumor. You're not going to die in the next 24 hours or 48 hours or what have you. Even though these cancer doctors, they try to scare you and say, oh my God, you have to start chemotherapy today, right now, sign now. They're just trying to make money off of you. Take a week, do your research. Be very clear-headed about it. Sleep on it. It's not an emergency. Cancer is usually it's almost never an actual emergency unless there's a tumor pressing against a large blood vessel or something. It's usually not an emergency. Do your research, take the time, talk to people who have been through cancer treatments. I would encourage you to find 5 people who have gone through chemo and find 5 people who have gone through natural routes and look at who's still living. Like, for one, who has a better quality of life? Who doesn't? I mean, who still has brain function? Who's healthy? Because that's going to tell you everything you need to know right there. But don't be driven by fear. That's the biggest mistake that cancer patients make.
Thank you, Mike. That's exactly the same thing I tell people too. Exactly. I love it. Okay.
That's great to hear. We didn't even plan that in advance, right?
We did not plan in advance. We're on the same wavelength. It's great. Okay, well, that's it. Wrapping it up officially. Thank you again, Mike. Thanks everybody for watching and listening. Please like and share this awesome interview. Spread it around the world, and let's just keep pushing forward and helping people understand that their choices matter and that they can take charge of their health and that the choices they make and it will impact their future.
Thank you, Chris. I really enjoyed this. Happy to join you anytime.
Awesome. Well, we'll do it again sometime. Thank you, Mike.
Okay.
Bye, everybody.